So this is not just a session of me talking and you listening, although it's okay if that's what works for you. If you are folding laundry or washing dishes or some other project and just listening, that's okay. Go for it. But you're going to get a lot more out of this if you follow along with pen and paper. So even if you are folding laundry, doing something, grab a notebook, grab a pen, repentantly. That sounds likely. Maybe. Okay, I'm not going to look it up on air right now and take a break, but I really want to. Wait, I know that. So grab paper, grab a pen or pencil, and work through this exercise with me. There are going to be questions along the way, and I don't have a download for this, at least not yet. Maybe I will after this is over. All right, or open Evernote or Google Keep or whatever. Typing sometimes is easier, but this is going to be brain dumping. So as we talk through these things, use the ideas, the conversation, not just what I'm saying, but also the chat box for prompts, for figuring out what's going on in your life. What are your biggest needs right now? What are your biggest obstacles? And as we put things onto paper, it helps us collect ourselves, collect our thoughts, and achieve more calm rather than letting all the thoughts jumble up in our heads. That's distracting. And when we're trying to hold all the things in our heads, we can't use our heads to think things through, to think things out, and to come up with creative solutions, to have just the mental space to problem solve. When we put the details and our thoughts and our connections and our troubles, all those things that pop into our head, instead of letting them just keep popping in our head, if we put them down onto paper, it helps us think about them instead of just the thoughts popping up. We can think about them and start to figure things out. So even if it's unrelated, when a thought pops into your head, as we talk through this and as you take notes and as you brain dump, it doesn't matter if it's a rabbit trail, write it down. Even if it's remember like, oh, I need to buy milk, write that down, because distraction really drains us. And that's one of the things we'll be talking about. And when we can just collect those random thoughts that pop in, it helps us remain calm and clear and not worry about forgetting the needful things. Even if it's like, I need to buy milk at the grocery store. It's amazing how much those little thoughts can collect and build and really clutter up our heads. So, and I love seeing the chat box too. So you guys are awesome. So share as you do. And I know a lot of you that are here have done lots of brain dumps with me. So share some of your takeaways or some of the insights that you have had along the way too, because that's going to help everyone else who's here. And it's going to help you also remember and act on it later because it's narration, right? It's good for moms too. And I really hope that you get a lot of actionable ideas out of this, not necessarily because it's advice from me, but because through the process of thinking about the different categories and really kind of doing some self-examination and some life examination, you can figure out a change that works for you and your life and your needs right now, because it's going to be different for each person, what you need to focus on and what you need to do. There's not a one right way. There's not a one size fits all solution at all. So we have to be able to take responsibility for our own selves and our own lives, and prayerfully and repentantly, I think that's right, move forward from where we are to the next step that, is part of our sanctification. So, okay. I have 3 different kinds of rest that we need. And then 3 things that we need rest from. So we're going to start with the different kinds of rests that we need, because I think that sometimes, we're so jumbled and we're so distracted and we're so tired and fatigued that it feels like any rest is the right rest or a good rest. And we do need rest, and some of it is good. But we need to figure out the kind of rest that we are lacking. And maybe it will be all 3 kinds, but they are different types of rest. So we have to build in these 3 different types of rest to our lives. And one kind, they'll build on each other and they'll help each other out, but they are different aspects of our lives that we do need to take. And we can take them intentionally without guilt, because these are clearly good things. Rest is a good thing. And these kinds of rests that we need to build into our lives are clearly in and of themselves good things. So if you feel currently guilty for resting because you have so much to do, be thinking along the way about how these are good, perhaps even equally good as your to-do list. And some of them might be more important than some of the things on your to-do list, because maybe your to-do list is full of guilt motivation or things that don't really need to be on there. A lot of our to-do list is just service to others, and we do need to step up to our duty. And rest is not opposed to doing our duty. So start off by listing the things that you currently do for rest. What do you currently do when you feel like you need a break? And then, I don't know if you want to star some or X others, use some kind of symbol or color or word, just write. Of those things that you do for rest, which ones do you feel rested after doing? Because not everything that we do to take a break helps us feel better afterwards, right? So if we don't feel better afterwards, if we don't feel rested and restored after doing it, it's not a break. Maybe it's stopping doing our work, but it's not rest. So we have to be examining what we're doing and whether or not it's what we should be doing. And perhaps there's guilt involved because what we're doing for rest isn't restful, so it doesn't help. So our anxiety and our stress is actually building instead of releasing, and we feel it just kind of builds and is a mess. So we're going to be taking a step back and examining what we're doing, how we feel when we do it, and let's talk about the goal of rest. Okay, so Erica says, everything I do to rest, I feel restful during it, but I feel guilty afterwards. So, right, scrolling social media is not restful. Exactly. That's the real, everyone. Can reading a book count as rest? Definitely. It definitely can. And, there are going to be times where maybe after reading a book, you do feel rested, and maybe after reading a book, you don't. It can depend on the situation. and what else is going on, or the kind of book, or there are multiple things going on pretty much all the time. So that's why we have to brain dump and really start following those connections and like, well, what's the difference between this time where I felt rested after reading a book, or maybe even after watching a TV show, and this time where it wasn't? Right. Sometimes you're even too tired to read. So we need to figure out the kind of rest that we need, the kind of tired that we are, and so that we know what to build more of into our life. So what's the goal for resting? If we step back and look at the end, keep the end in mind, that will help us not feel guilty when we are legitimately resting. And it will help us recognize true rest from fake rest. So the goal for resting is to be rested, right? This isn't super deep. So the goal of resting is peace and restoration, refreshment. If we go into rest as leisure and Scholé, Pieper's book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, takes us on a journey on exploring leisure and its purpose, and it goes toward worship. And I think that is a good insight for us as we think about rest. Of course, the Bible talks about rest as connected to the Sabbath a lot. And the point of the Sabbath is worship. When we have a mind and a soul at peace, we can be grateful. We can be attentive. I mean, mindful kind of now has a lot of vague spirituality, or, other kind of, it's a fine word, but sometimes it's used by a direction we don't want to go necessarily, but attentive, even to God, and attentive to what he is doing in our life right now, instead of maybe what we are trying to do in our life. We can be more open and receptive when our minds and our souls and our bodies are at peace. But when our bodies are tired and fatigued, when our mind is distracted, and when we haven't been spending any time in God's word, with God's people, worshiping, then these are all blockage, obstacles to finding rest, which is from God. Real rest is from God, even if it comes after a novel. Like, it's a blessing that we can have, and that is good for us, because God rested on the seventh day, not because he needed a break, but because that is the end of work. That's enjoying the work. That's what he did. So he didn't, a lot of the things that we do, he didn't go find entertainment or anything. He was taking enjoyment from his work. And that was how he rested. He wasn't doing work, but he was enjoying the fruits of his work. And that was rest. Also, in the and so that's why then there's the Sabbath. It follows this model. God was modeling a pattern that he wanted us to follow: work and then enjoy the work, enjoy the fruits of the work. It's okay and good and right to not be go, 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 work, 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 productive mode all the time. That is not God's will for us. It is God's will for us to do our duty. And part of our duty is to take a step back and be grateful and worshipful and enjoy the fruits of our work. That's legitimate. And then we see in the New Testament, and that Jesus fulfilling the law, and Jesus being the work for us, right? And the shift to the Lord's Day, to the day of worship being the first day of the week instead of at the end of the week. Now it comes at the beginning of the week. And the symbolism in that of Jesus being our rest. So our rest, our ultimate rest, our spiritual rest, our inner peace is not coming as a result of the works that we are doing. And that includes dishes and laundry and all the little things that we are doing all the time. We don't earn our rest from all those activities. We do all that work as a grateful response of service to God. And we don't have to do enough to earn a rest afterwards. We start in Jesus. We start with gratitude, knowing that he has done the work. He's paid it all. We find our fulfillment in him. And so from that rested state, then we work. And that work then is done in gratitude and not in stress. And it's done being attentive to what God is working out providentially in our lives, which is often very different from our own plans. And because we aren't consumed with doing enough, then we can be free to roll with the punches, like we say, and work the plan. It's not us grabbing control and grabbing what we think we need, but it's doing the thing that God has placed in front of us to do. And sometimes he places in front of us the opportunities for rest, and we should take those also. So that was actually a bigger tangent than I was thinking, but it's so true. And that is foundational to resting. It's not, I think that a lot of the guilt comes from believing that we have to do enough to earn the rest. And that's not true. The guilt, though, sometimes is from the kind of rest that we're taking. Like, we're looking for rest in all the wrong places. So maybe probably not start, but continue in your brain dump on the places that you look for rest. And let's start the kind of rest. So I have 3 kinds of rest. And I'm going to switch up the order here. We're going to start with physical, and then do spiritual, and then do mental. Those are the 3 kinds of rest that we should be finding in our days. And we can find in our days. These things aren't that hard. It's just, they aren't complex or complicated. They're hard to do. Like most things, right? They aren't the easy path. And sometimes we think that rest should equal ease. And that is not the case, actually. We want the path of least resistance, but that's where we get rest that's not restful. Rest is deliberate and intentional and takes work to do. But it's a work of a different kind. And so some of our problem with rest is equating it with ease, and that will wind up doing more harm than good in the long run. So physical rest, let's start with that. Of course, we need sleep. And so sometimes a lot of our fatigue or discontent or laziness is actually tiredness, sleepiness. And there are seasons in life where that's just the case. We are called to a sleep-deprived state sometimes. We are supposed to do our duty, and we are supposed to look for rest and take rest. But sometimes the duty that's put before us precludes the sleep that our bodies need. So those are times of real dependence and reliance on God. And sometimes he gives that to us so that we can realize that we were trying to do it on our own and we can't. I've had 2 babies that just were not sleepers. Waking up every 2 hours round the clock for nearly a year. And so I know that it's really frustrating when people say, so sleep enough hours at night. And I'm like, I can't. Sometimes you can't. If you can, do. Then there are other seasons of life where we're staying up too late because we're looking for that rest that we think the ease, the distraction kind of rest, the entertainment kind of rest, or, we want peace in our days. And sometimes the only peace that is there is after everyone else is in bed. And so we want to enjoy it. And some of that's legitimate, but, we have to examine and ask the Lord to show us how we're doing, what we're doing wrong, and say, am I stealing sleep from myself when I shouldn't be? So there are different times in life. It took quite a while for me after I had everyone sleeping through the night to realize that I had patterns still that were from the sleep deprived state, that now it was time to grow out of those. There were the survival mode and survival strategies that I didn't really need anymore, but now they were just the norm. And I needed to actually go to bed at a reasonable hour. And I could say, because no one's interrupting my sleep, I have a responsibility to take, to use the hours that I should be sleeping and sleep. Right. Like putting a book down when you should go to sleep. But sometimes I'm just not allowed to read novels. I don't allow myself to read novels or I can't read a good book that I've never read before bed. I just can't because I will stay up too late. So, thinking through those things and what are my weak points? How can I address those and make it work? But then if you're going through a sleep deprived state where there isn't a way out of that, then you have to really rely on the spiritual rest and the mental rest, which we will talk about later. But also just know that it's a real thing. Not getting enough sleep will affect your memory, will affect your ability to think in a straight line. It will affect how much you can do. And so don't put standards on yourself of expecting yourself to perform at the same level that you do when you have enough sleep as you can now when you're sleep deprived. You need to give yourself different standards for the different seasons of life. So think about your sleep patterns and, what you need to be doing or what you can do about that first, because we need affects everything. It affects our resilience, our ability to handle people not doing what we want them to do, which moms need to be able to do that, right? So what can we do? And if anyone has things that you have done that have helped, share those in the comments, because this is just the common law of moms, right? We go through these different times in life where different things are needed, and we can help each other out. Another way to sometimes we need physical rest, and we can actually take a nap. I did this off and on, and enough to know that it was really the thing I should be doing. But I had a timer on my alarm for 3 days a week. It went off at 12:30. So I should have had lunch by then. And it said, take a half-hour power nap. And it wasn't so much for the sleep as for the break and the rest, because I did it on days where I was teaching a class. So I homeschooled my kids. And then on 3 days a week, different kids come to our house and we do group lessons. And I love it. And it really helps us stay on track. And it's awesome in all kinds of ways. But I then usually can't do anything for several hours after that. I'm just like, okay, I am totally zoned out, done. And I don't feel necessarily physically tired, like I need to go to sleep. I just feel mentally disengaged and done. Like the only thing I can do is zone out now, maybe read a book, but mostly just scroll Instagram. And I know we can all relate to that probably, especially introverts. So this is the introvert has had enough, and then you just feel flat and done. What do you do? And some of that is mental rest, but it's physical too. And I'm not really a napper. And if I take a nap, I usually wake up and I feel worse. So I didn't really think this was going to work for me. But I set an alarm, and most of the time I did not fall asleep. But I had 20 minutes of basically sensory deprivation, what it was. And that was exactly what I needed to re-enter the day, because the cause of my need to zone out was basically an introvert wall that I was hitting, right? And taking a step back, closing the door in my bedroom. Everyone else, they had something to do, and they knew this is only going to be half an hour. Mom will be back down in a bit. You have to actually follow through and do that, or anyway, you know. And my kids are older. I don't have toddlers anymore. Anyway, you know, there are different adjustments that have to be made. But I would lay on the bed, lights off, door closed. I should have had earplugs. That would probably have been even better. But I would drape a black shirt over my eyes, and I think that was actually key. And it was just a few moments of no one's talking to me. I'm not even really thinking about anything. And after that, I could re-enter the day going again. I could start going. And so sometimes we have to experiment. Maybe try that out, but I'm not saying that's a one size fits all solution. I'm saying even before I tried that, I was telling, well, I'm not a napper. I will wake up feeling worse. I had all these things like, that's not going to work for me. Okay, fine, I'll try it. And I found a way where it did solve the problem that I had. And again, the goal is re-entering life rested and restored. And that's what it did. So now that I know that fixes it, I have the responsibility to do it, which I've stopped that habit. And so anyway, try things out and experiment. Don't feel like you have to commit to doing something. Have a mindset and a mentality of experimentation. We call this iteration in Simplified Organization and Work the Plan, where you try something out and then troubleshoot from there, instead of stepping back from. You need to start by stepping back from the problem, but instead of staying there, examining the issue until you feel like you have the best solution to implement, you try something, and then you see what happens, and you learn about yourself and your situation by trying something and not waiting for the perfect solution to try something. So, that was one way that I found to take an intentional break. And I do notice that when I don't do that, I am much more likely to walk into my room and just, plaster myself on the bed or on my chair and pick up the phone and scroll through Instagram or check my email again for no reason. So at those moments where you're taking those kind of brain dead breaks, try some kind of sensory deprivation for maybe even 5 minutes. And sometimes even bathroom breaks work for this, right? Like it's a small little closet. Like try turning off the light for 2 minutes and just sitting there breathing. That can be surprisingly helpful. And you can do that, even if you have little kids for just, a few minutes. And then the other physical rest idea, troubleshooting solution that you might try is drinking more water. I am always surprised how much that affects my mental state and my energy state. If you feel tired or hungry, start with a glass of water. It's easy, it's right there. And sometimes that's like what our body needs to flush things out and restore. Just sometimes we don't need more coffee. We need more water. So, and then you get to use the bathroom more often, right? So it's like win-win. So just try water as a break. And sometimes even just taking them as intentional, like doing it on purpose, also helps. And we'll get to why that is with the mental rest thing. But don't just make it haphazard, but make it a deliberate choice. And we think that that's like effort, and what we want is non-effort. But restorative effort is restorative. And so it is rest. That was a big long tangent on, not really a tangent, but the introvert restoration. If you're an extrovert, I think that a lot of times the advice is all about being around people. And that does help. Like you like being around people and that sort of thing, but it doesn't have to be talking to a friend or going to a party. Extroverts don't have to go to parties to be restored. Extroverts want to express. So the introvert, after, having a lot of expression and outward stuff going on, needs the stimulation break. Like, so dark, quiet, like just nothing, no sensory. The extrovert, on the other hand, needs a way to express. So that can be a musical instrument, that can be singing, that can be maybe walking and observing what's going on around you. Maybe paging through an art book, but especially, so kind of soaking in some kind of peaceful outside of you stimulation. But that's order, so like music, art, where it's not random stuff coming at you, not distraction, but it's intentional, single-minded, something that can really engage your attention or that you are creating. So sewing, music, an instrument, singing, trying to think, but doing something with your body or your voice or, that sort of thing, where you're creating or expressing. It doesn't have to be with other people. And that's kind of a misconception. Just like a misconception about introverts is that they're antisocial. A misconception about extroverts is that they have to be with other people. That's not true. So there are some ideas. And if you have some, share them, please. Okay. So that was physical rest. I hope they won't all take this long, but they might. Second, we're going to talk about spiritual rest. So, and I loved seeing this in the comments that were here before we got started. Most of the people who left comments there had already zeroed in that this was the real need. And it's true. And we talked about it a little bit already before, right? So when we need rest, we need peace and calm and, joy, these things that are fruits of the spirit, right? Self-control. Actually, we get rest when we are exercising self-control in certain ways. And anyway, it's a fruit of the spirit. And Christ has promised us rest, right? In many different places. But, come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest. So we know that, but we aren't exactly sure how to apply that or find it. And in your brain dump, you maybe write down some of the problems you've had trying to apply that verse, or in trying to seek spiritual rest and you didn't actually feel rested afterwards. Sometimes we feel like, if a Bible reading plan or a prayer time is on our checklist, then it doesn't count as rest because I'm accomplishing something. And so then we either don't count it as rest, and how we categorize things and what we call them in our minds is a big part of whether or not we derive rest from them. But if it's on our checklist, we will either discount it and not count it as rest, or we will not have it on our checklist because we don't want it to be a to-do item that we just check the box on. And then we're just really hit or miss on whether or not we read our Bible and pray and that sort of thing. And so it's like, if it's on our checklist, we feel guilty. And if it's not on our checklist, it doesn't happen. And so we feel guilty. So go ahead and put it on your checklist. If Pam has a great post up, Pam Barnhill. I don't think it's the top post anymore, but she has a post this week called something for the checklist mom. I should have pulled up that link. If someone has the link, you could put it in there. It's just so good. We don't have to feel guilty for putting these things on our checklist because we're committing to them and we are wanting to do them. If you are a checklist person, like, run with that, use it. It doesn't make it inferior at all. There, thank you. So go ahead and put it on your checklist. But also, a lot of times we get these ideas from all kinds of places, but we have this idea in our head of what morning devotions are supposed to look like. And when that doesn't happen, we don't count it, or we don't do it because it's not what we wanted. It's not what we thought it should be. And that's just perfectionism. And that's looking for it to be our way before it's good. And that's not good. We need to take the opportunities that are in front of us. And sometimes that means that it happens with kids in the same room. Sometimes it means it's interrupted. Sometimes it's not alone, even though we would like it to be alone. Sometimes it means doing the Bible on audio and praying while walking, using some other time, maybe while laundry folding, finding some other time where it's maybe not this peaceful, quiet, beautiful moment with candles and coffee. It might not be Instagrammable, but it's spending time in prayer and Bible reading, and it counts because it's God's word, and God's word does not return void. It doesn't have to be us making it work by doing it right. We can, praying while driving. That's perfect. So finding those times where we are to pray continually, right? So that means we don't have to just have the one special morning time. It means we can do it anytime. And so this, earlier this year, I did a program called Humble Habits. And the very first habit we did was a prayer habit where it was just one sentence prayer that we did, attached to some everyday activity. Some people did it while making their coffee or while washing their hands in the bathroom or doing their hair or makeup or whatever. And actually, what I found myself and what other people also said they found was that just stopping in the midst of the day was actually more centering, orienting ourselves to what's true and real, instead of being just constantly in the distraction mode of the daily details. Having a stop point and even just a very small, very short breath and meditation on God's word and praying it back to him was so effective in helping us handle the rest of the day. So it doesn't have to be half an hour at a certain time in a certain place. Like, those things can help and they're great when they work. But a lot of times for moms and how kids grow and change, and a lot of times that's just not reasonable to expect. And we cannot let our expectations get in the way of doing, of prayer and Bible reading. Yeah. Okay. I'm getting distracted. Okay. Thanks. I was going to share the Christ Church Bible reading plan. They have a summer one that's coming up, and I'm going to do the summer one. I missed out on this fall one that they did, but I'm going to do it next fall, where it's through the Bible, and they have pretty bookmarks. You can sign up and get weekly emails to help you remember, to keep up with it. But, you can listen to it on audio. There are different ways to do it. And it being a checklist and checking the box does not negate the value and the goodness. And it doesn't have to be long, and it doesn't have to be in a certain place at a certain time, to be effective. We can do that for habit building, but it's not like we're up a creek if it didn't happen. Like, once you notice it didn't happen, like, you can just do it. If we wait for the perfect, the prayer and the Bible reading will not happen. That's exactly right. Thank you, Alicia. And then the other thing that we need for spiritual rest is corporate worship on Sunday. So we need to be a part of the body of Christ, and we need to be at church, and we need to be worshiping God and participating in the sacraments and sitting under the preaching of the word. And our culture today, even our Christian culture, really does not value corporate worship. But remember that the epistles were all written to churches. They were sermons delivered to churches. The Christians were expected to be gathering and listening to God's word. And we are still expected to gather and listen to God's word and worship together. So you're not a loner Christian. You can find a community of believers, I hope, and really prioritize that in your life, because it can feel, especially if you have little kids, it doesn't feel restful a lot of the time. But we have to go on God's promises and God's ideas for how our weeks should be oriented, and not our own feelings. A lot of time, when we had toddlers and I was in and out, like, I did not hear a whole sermon or participate in a whole worship service for years, but we still went. And even that is just a statement of our family priority. And it's still saying, even though this doesn't seem to really make sense, I'm going to obey. And blessing comes to that, even if it's imperfect and messy and doesn't feel like you think it should, just like the personal devotions, right? It doesn't have to be a perfect church. It should be a Bible believing church. There are certain issues that we should make sure are in place, but if we have our standards for our expectations of what we think it should be and feel like, then sometimes those are just temptations to not do what we're supposed to do. Yes. It's good for the toddlers, even though it doesn't look like it, and it's good for moms, even though it doesn't look like it. That's where we go and we trust and rest. And finally, this is going to be a longer chat than I thought. Finally, we have mental rest. And I think this is the category that we are least aware of, but that is actually tripping us up the most. I'm currently reading the book Deep Work by Cal Newport, and I wasn't even expecting it to tie into these ideas that I was having about rest and, what we need to do and all that, but it does. So, when we are tempted to zone out, it's because we are overwhelmed, right? We are overwhelmed by all the details, all the distractions, all the things going on in our life, all the people asking us questions all the time, and sometimes even we're asking ourselves questions all the time, like, because we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We don't know where the thing is. Like, everything feels like a scramble. Am I right? And sometimes it's not because you need physical rest, and it's not because you need spiritual rest. Sometimes it's just because life is full of all these inputs and it's chaotic and overwhelming, and we don't have what it takes to order it all, like to put it into order. It's all coming at us and it's all chaotic and messy, and we don't know what to do. And then we feel worse because we don't know what to do with it all. And it's just all coming at us. And it's like, all I can think to do is just turn it all off. And so I think if your feeling of I need rest comes out as turn it all off, then this is where you need to really start brain dumping and applying and thinking. You don't necessarily have to assume you have a spiritual problem. Like, we have to make sure that that's in order first, but it doesn't necessarily, feeling like you just need to turn it all off, you just can't handle it anymore. It's not necessarily a spiritual problem. It's partly the way our current world is running, with the priority on distraction mode. And when we're in a distracted state, that is the opposite of peace. And we don't know how to get to peace. If we are functioning completely in distracted mode all the time, we actually lose the ability to basically think in a straight line. And unless we can think in a straight line, like, we aren't going to be able to problem solve. We aren't going to be able to, provide the counseling and parenting that our children really need, because it's so hard to pay attention. The connection. So distraction is like the opposite of attention, and attentiveness is the ability to pay attention, is sometimes what we actually are needing when we feel like we need rest. It's a feeling of, I need to turn off this distraction mode and have a time where I can actually have a complete thought and move forward with that complete thought. And so, so that's one reason why taking a walk helps. Yes. Walking in a straight line physically helps the brain feel more linear. That's perfect. Yes. Tired, 8 kids, a puppy, and kittens. Yes, the feeling of being tugged in every direction. I think that we can all relate to that. And so in the book, Deep Work, Cal Newport is talking about how we need to set aside undistracted time. And, pretty much his only, like, the solution is just turn the internet off. Like, how hard? Just do it. And have one project that you just work on. And it's like, well, yeah, that'd be nice if I had an office door I could close and just turn off the internet connection, and that would turn off all the distractions. Not like the internet might provide another layer of distractions, but we've got so many things coming at us all the time that, you could take a step and do the easy things like turning the notifications on your phone off. That's a good one. But we can find times like this even in a house full of children who need us all day. And one of the things that we need to do is to realize that we have to. And so when we feel guilty if we feel like we just have to shut this all off. Because so we have all these distractions, then we feel overwhelmed and we don't know what to do. And the only solution we can think of is to turn it all off. And we feel guilty for that because we know that's not what we should be doing. We shouldn't just be like, go away. So we get in this cycle then of just keeping going, and it just gets worse until we crack. And the fact that we crack should show that something's out of whack here, something's off kilter, and we do need to do something different. We need to find some times in our day where we are not being interrupted. It's healthy. It's healthy for everyone. It's healthy for our kids to not be constantly talking or interrupting or needing things. A lot of, you see all kinds of articles lately today about how kids are never bored anymore, and it's actually bad for them. We live in a time where we have to be very intentional to guard our mental health, honestly. And we can do that by saying, no, this is just like everyone has to eat their vegetables. We have to have some time where we are not talking, asking questions, needing things. Like, we have to build this intentional time into our day for everyone's, and not just for mom, not just so that I can handle you, but because this is good for all of us. It's not like you can demand a quiet time in a selfish way, and probably we all have. And so then we feel guilty or bad because we did that with a wrong attitude and wrong motivation. We did it in a grabby, self-seeking way. And so then we overreact the other way and say, well, because the way that I was needing a quiet time was wrong, therefore I must not need, an afternoon without anyone talking to me. I've just got to go and get over it. You can actually figure out ways to have some quiet spaces intentionally, kindly, gracefully, in non-selfish ways. So, I've seen some people do this lately. Yes, a decision break. Exactly. Decision fatigue is super real. And it's not just our kids pestering that puts us over the edge. It's ourselves also. Our own minds are always going. And that's one reason why we're brain dumping, right? We're getting it out of our head so that our own head is not pestering us. So we have to find ways, because I think that we also might find a way to arrange for the kids to give us, 30 minutes of not talking to us. And then we find that didn't help as much as I thought it would, because a lot of the distraction mode is still here. Even if we turn the phone off, even if we send the kids away, then we find the problems still here. And brain dump. And this is where organization can bring more peace. And a lot of the ways that, you see organization on Pinterest or that kind of thing, where it means label makers and matching containers and a perfect cleaning schedule where you take all the buckets out and wipe down the inside of the cabinet every month. That increases our feeling of obligation and increases our feelings of inadequacy. Like, that's just not going to work in my life. What do I do now? Because I'm incompetent on so many levels. A box for every bobby pin. But it's the problem when this is the problem, when it's in our heads, it's one of three things. So these are the last 3 points on my list that I was telling you about. We need peace from three things. So this is our own internal problems that are giving us unrest. One is anxiety. And I feel completely unable to really deeply address that one, because I know that so many people struggle with anxiety as like a real deep-seated, maybe even chemical issue. But anxiety is going to steal your peace and steal your rest. It makes rest impossible. So we have to address it. We can't just live with it. We have to address it. And I don't think she's here right now. I know that you can find her on Instagram as Redeeming Homemaker. She has, and I guess histories are hard on Instagram, but Isaiah 40 for anxiety, Philippians 4, like anxiety is actually a sin. And we need to repent, and then we need to rejoice, and we need to do it over and over again. So sometimes we think that because, like, if we keep doing it, then I'm either off the hook or I'm a lost case. But it's just something that we have to keep doing. And then the peace of God is given to us when we pray with thanksgiving. Thank you. Nina at Redeeming Homemaking. I'm Redeemed Homemaking. Are you sure it's redeemed? Not redeeming. She did some stories a while back, but I think that she has posts if you go back, because she struggled with that and shared some resources that I don't have off the cuff right now. But I know she had resources if you struggle with anxiety. But yeah, like actually repenting instead of just feeling bad. Sometimes just feeling bad is us letting ourselves off the hook, but actually calling it a sin, asking God to help us. And Philippians 4 says, with gratitude. And that doesn't mean like, so I'm thankful for fluffy kittens and blue skies. It's like, be grateful in the situation that you're in, because you can always be thankful for Jesus, right? Even if that's, so be thankful even within the situation where you're at, not for things outside your situation, but for inside your situation. Prayer with thanksgiving, making your requests known, and then the peace of God that surpasses understanding. I was like, it's pretty clear verse. And we can keep coming back to it. That's why it's repent, rejoice, repeat. Like, it's not a once and done thing, and now we're never going to have this problem again. It's going to keep being an ongoing problem. But every time it is, it's like, oh, I know what to do. And it's that knowing what to do that brings us rest. So it's not even about an escape from it or solving it. It's knowing what to do. So that brings the peace. Well, I mean, God brings the peace, but That's a big part of it. Okay, but the two big ones, that one's like its own big, huge category. And then the two like everyday peace stealers and unrest creators are decision fatigue and the feeling of vague obligation. Like there are so many things that I should be doing, I don't even know what they all are. How many people have ever felt like that? Like, I have so many. Oh, I didn't even know she had this. Very good. Thank you, Trish. So click there, Redeeming Homemaking. Yes, so many things. I have so many things to do. I don't even know what they all are. I see a lot of hand raising. Yes, yes. Vague obligation. So this is where like actual real life organization comes in, where we can be, where the organization is about our attitude and about an approach to life and not about necessarily having the most orderly closets or the corners that are free from gunk. I had to tell myself that this week. Yeah. I will not be taking vlogs of my home. Let's just say that. But real organization starts in our heads, and it starts by knowing what those obligations are and making some of those decisions up front so that we can just do what we need to do. So one example, I'm going to try to, we're already over an hour and I try to keep these way shorter than that. But so an example is our family's EHAP. So EHAP is one of those things. It's a part of Sweep and Smile. It's a part of the Simplified Organization course. That means everything has a place. Sometimes everything doesn't have a place. That's why there's more decision fatigue, because you're like, where do I put this thing? Giving things a home is one way we eliminate decision fatigue. So it's a project. It's something we do that's going to give us, it's going to have the payoff of rest after it's done. Then step back to EHAP. EHAP is our time to put things back where they belong. And it has a time and it has a place every day. At our house, it's about 5 o'clock most evenings, not every single evening, but most evenings at 5 o'clock is EHAP. That means at 3 o'clock, when the house is a wreck and I feel like, oh, we got to do something about this now, take a deep breath. And we don't have to do something about this now. We're going to do something about it at 5. So right now I can let the kids be doing their thing and not interrupt them because I feel crazy. Like I'm the one that has to take a deep breath and say, we got this handled. It's okay. There's a time for everything and everything in its time. So everything in its home and everything in its time. That's when we can take that breath and know that the decision then has been made. It's not an immediate problem. It's not a vague problem. So we have to systematically work through our responsibilities and our obligations and our time and our home, and in various ways put things in their home. And that is how we then build the mental rest in our own heads. And yes, we can then also build time where we aren't being interrupted and asked a million questions. But here's another thing to add to your brain dump, maybe throughout the week, maybe write down the various kinds or maybe even specific questions your kids are asking. And maybe there are decisions that can be made up front. Like, are they asking questions because they really want to know what's happening because it's always up in the air? Like the more things are always up in the air, the more chatter there's going to be from the kids and from your own head. But if breakfast is always oatmeal, because no one asks what's for breakfast. If one of my favorites is the kids ask what's for dinner, I say food. I don't have to think about it. I might have my menu plan, but sometimes, like ask me at a certain time. I don't know, we're going to have something. Or sometimes a lot of times I'm just making something. It doesn't have a name. So then you're like thinking food, we're going to have food. It's just finding those little things that just turn off the stress response, is what the distraction, the looking for an answer. That is where we're going to start finding mental peace and clarity. So, yes, evening tidy, it could have different names, but it helps so much. So maybe pay attention to the questions that you're asked this week and see if there's a common thread, or note which ones are most draining to you. And is there a way that you can arrange the day or just have a pat answer that eliminates the stress that comes when the question comes? Sometimes these are really easy, really simple if we look intentionally at it. But when we get into distracted mode, it takes work and intention to get out of it. And that's where I am right now in the deep workbook. I'm in the rules section, but he's really developing how hard it is to move from distracted to thinking in a straight line again, and how intentional we have to be, and that it's really like a muscle that we have to grow. So if we've been in distracted mode for a really long time, it's not going to be about just arranging a quiet time and then suddenly we'll be able to think deeply. It's going to take practice to exercise that kind of attention again. And it will be uncomfortable at first as well, and difficult at first. But that ability to think through something without being distracted is where we'll start finding calm and clarity and resilience, which I think, we don't just need physical rest, like selfishly for ourselves to feel better. What we need is resilience. We need internal calm and clarity so that when craziness happens outside of us with other people, people are bumping into each other, bumping into us, we need to have a bubble. We need to have resilience, the ability to bounce back and to not just crumble or explode or whatever, immediate reaction happens. To be, sometimes this is expressed as being proactive. You can't be proactive or resilient in a state of constant distraction. The two states are mutually exclusive. So it's a really important issue to address. And now I could keep going. But this is why every summer I say that my project is going to be to clean and organize the whole house, because we've just finished a school year, we've wrapped up loose ends, but there are a lot of the loose ends are still laying in the corners of the house, and the bookshelves are everything is kind of messy, not kind of messy, very messy. Yes. So the three things that we need peace from, the three things that are building distraction and unrest in our minds, are anxiety, decision fatigue, and vague obligation. So I always tell myself, well, I'm going to clean and organize the entire house this summer. And it never happens. But the strides that I do make during the summer help the following year, because it's putting things in its place. And so cleaning and organizing the whole house as an unreasonable, unrealistic goal is kind of the catch-all thing I tell myself that I'm going to do, because any kind of order that I put things into, whether it's the home or a cleaning routine or getting back to a better state of clean in the bathrooms, for example, ordering the calendar, putting my command center into order again, because it's become just a pile of papers. Any kind of order I can build is going to have payoff. And really, even just getting started and having one little corner that's more orderly has a big payoff because we can step back and enjoy it, right? Going back to the kind of rest that God took, which was to step back and enjoy the work. Like, it doesn't have to be all done before you can do that. And that is being attentive to it. So, make dinner when you sit down at the dinner table. Look around the table, everyone together, and the food on the table, even if it's from a box, even if it's takeout. It's dinner, and you're all sitting around together, and you have some food to eat. And this is something to be thankful for and to enjoy. And so enjoyment is a part of rest. Making my bed never stuck as a habit until I started taking 1 second to look at it and enjoy it. Like, choose to enjoy it instead of saying, well, I did it, but it doesn't matter. Picking just one shelf and restoring some order there. Don't just move on to the next thing immediately like a distracted state. Take a step back and enjoy it. It helps a lot, especially like evening routine. It doesn't have to be perfect, but when you are done, step back and say, this is better. Or thank you, Lord, for this kitchen and for the work that goes on here. That's building small little attentive moments that are going to build up, and that help build that calm resilience instead of just going from one thing to another, helter-skelter crazy making. So find